Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to show you how you can improve your composition with collage. Just doing some simple painting of pebbles and then gluing them onto another sheet of watercolor paper. I have 3 Daniel Smith colours that I'm using today: buff titanium, iridescent moonstone, and duochrome autumn mystery. Now, if you didn't have these colours, you can just pick 3 colours that have earth tones in them and that will mix nicely, and you can use any brand of paints for this. I have a pair of scissors because I'm going to cut out this first piece that I'm painting, and I have a pack of Princeton Velvet Touch brushes, and these are my favourite brushes to use at the moment. I really love the number 8 long round, so that's what I'm going to use, but there's a selection of brushes in here, so these are good value as a set of brushes to get you started, and they're very good quality. So to make these pebbles, I'm going to mix some colours together, and then we're going to cut out all the pebbles and glue them to a second sheet of this watercolour paper. The paper I'm using is from Wanderings, and it's 90 GSM. It's not terribly thick. You don't need thick paper for this. Any watercolour paper would do that's not too thick. So I'm putting everything onto these little palettes, and the first colour I'm bringing in is duochrome autumn mystery, and I'm just going to paint a pebble shape. So I'm using Wanderings watercolour paper, which is not too heavy, and starting with the autumn mystery and painting a pebble shape. I love painting pebbles. I think they're quite a meditative exercise. Now I'm putting some buff titanium in to give it a more rounded appearance, and mixing directly on the paper, adding a little bit more water to my brush each time, just to blend those colours together. And the idea of this collage is that each of these pebbles will be cut out and made into a collage. And I'll show you some tips on the best ways to use adhesive on collage and how to keep your work really clean and free of glue so that you don't get glue everywhere. So I'm going to give you some of those tips towards the end when we get to putting our collage together. So this is buff titanium, and now I'm adding in a little autumn mystery, so I'm reversing the process here. And I'm going to see how many different combinations I can get with just these 3 colours and how we mix them. Now I'm using the iridescent moonstone, and I'll talk to you in a moment about the different properties of the duochrome, iridescent and granulating colours in the Daniel Smith range. So this is a lovely silvery tone, silvery grey I would say. Rinsing off, and now I'm adding some of that buff titanium. Buff titanium is a really great mixing colour. It is granulating and gives you some really interesting effects. So again, I'm just adding that smaller oval within the large pebble just to give them a rounded shape and to give them 2 different tones. I'm going to pop some music on while I do the rest of the pebbles, and I'll get back to you once we're ready to start cutting them out. I'm going to talk about some of the properties of these Daniel Smith paints. So at the moment I'm using the iridescent moonstone here. This is non-staining, it's granulating and it's transparent. So the iridescent colours give a reflection, so when a particle of light hits the paint or pigment matrix, it bounces back much like a mirror. Now with the duochrome autumn mystery here, it is non-staining, granulating and transparent, and a duochrome colour is one pigment that bounces between two colours. So both the iridescent and duochrome colours are quite shimmery and shiny, whereas this buff titanium is a non-staining, granulating and semi-transparent paint. Next, I'm going to add some slightly different shapes so that we have some interest in our composition. I'm going to make some long shapes and some bigger shapes here, just a couple, and we're almost ready to add some more details. I'm looking to have a pleasing composition at the end of this collage, so I'm adding the same touches to each of these pebbles with my HB pencil. I'm just drawing some lines in, and I'm going to add to that with some charcoal. So I have some 2B charcoal, and I'm going to add thicker lines and darker lines using the charcoal. So we have the subtle lines of the HB pencil, now we have a 2B charcoal, and I'm going to just add some striations or lines in these pebbles to make them look a little more textured and a little more well defined. And these lines can be quite loose, the looser the better. Some of them are going in different directions. Some will be vertical, some will be horizontal. You can have a mixture of vertical and horizontal on each pebble if you want to. And this is going to give our composition some interest. I have a bag here of my favourite adhesives and tape, and I'm going to use this Yamato rice glue, which is a Japanese glue. You could also use a glue stick. Glue sticks are usually made from wheat-based material, or you could use something like Tombow multi-adhesive, which works very well on paper. But the rice glue is definitely my preference for this. Now, as I cut out each of these pebbles, I'm going to leave a deliberate white border around it. And I think this adds to the charm of the final piece. But because it's going to be adhered to exactly the same watercolor paper that we've used to paint on, it's going to be a very harmonious blend of paper on paper. And I'm going to speed up this cutting out section because you don't need to sit through me laboriously cutting out piece after piece of paper. Just remember to leave that white border around each of your shapes, and you'll end up with this lovely pile of collage fodder. And we're going to immediately turn it into a completed collage, and I'll show you how to do that now. So I'm taking the same sheet of Wanderings paper, and I'm going to arrange my shapes and play around and see what I like the best. And there's no right or wrong to this. It's exactly the way you want it to be rather than how someone proscribes it for you. And you'll find by moving shapes around, having a bit of a play. I like to leave a bit of a border around my piece so that there's space top and bottom, side to side, and that helps it look much more symmetrical. Once I'm happy with it, I can bring in my glue and commit. So I'm using the same china dishes. These came from IKEA. I find them really helpful for glue or paint. They make great little palettes and they're very inexpensive. They're easy to clean up. Adding quite a bit of glue to that. Now, you could start by gluing it like this, but you're going to end up with glue all over your fingers. The best way I find to do this is to get some paper towel and use that to glue your shapes, and I'll show you how to do this. So you take your shape, put some glue beyond the shape so it goes out beyond the shape, pick it up with your paintbrush, put it down and put clean paper towel over the top. And as you use the paper towel, be aware where the glue has been and fold the paper towel in on itself. Pick up with your paintbrush and glue it down. So at no point is the glue going to smoosh around and get in the way. This glue does dry clear, but it could smear your watercolour. So you want to make sure that you're getting all the ends glued, picking it up with your paintbrush and using that paper towel, the clean section of the paper towel, to press it down. So for this entire piece, I only used 2 pieces of paper towel, so it's a quite economical way of using paper to help adhere your collage. You can see how I'm going beyond the shape. Picking it up with a paintbrush means you're not touching it with your fingers or getting glue on your hands, and that's an important part of a nice clean piece. Now I'm going to add more to this once the pieces are put together. There's going to be a background that we paint directly onto that white piece of paper underneath, because at the moment the composition is fine, but it's looking a little bare. And I'm going to introduce the same 3 colours in smaller pebbles directly painted onto the background. So I still have them out on my palettes here. I don't like wasting any pigment, so I like to keep using until there's virtually nothing left. So I'm going to do this with the long round brush, which has a beautiful fine point. And you can see I'm making different sizes of pebbles in the background, and I'm moving this autumn mystery colour all around the page with some small, medium, large and extra large shapes. A couple of other tips I find really helpful when looking at composition is to turn your paper around and look at it from all angles, or to hold it up in front of a mirror and look at it in reverse. Sometimes when you're sitting in front of it for a while working, you lose a sense of what it actually looks like because you're too close to it. So looking at it in a mirror can show you where there might be any gaps, or whether it's a little imbalanced, or whether you might want to add some more detail. All of that helps. And you can see me here moving that paper around, and it also makes it easier to reach those parts that you want to paint. And as I add in the buff titanium here, you'll see that this composition is really gaining some strength. If you found something useful in this video, I'd love it if you give me a like. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already for lots more mixed media, watercolor and card making videos. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.